moving on to tonight's presentation, we're extremely pleased to welcome back Alison Bolton. A number of you will have heard her talk last year, and we're very grateful, Alison, that you were able to come in at what was relatively short notice when we had to do some shuffling about. So thank you so much for that. Alison is a professional astrologer, a writer. I understand that what sparked your interest at the very beginning was a consultation with the very famous Liz Green.
Oh, yes.
And that goes back to the 1980s. Goodness, I think I would have loved to have had an astrology consultation with Liz Green. I'm not surprised you were inspired. And I know you've done a lot of research into Jung and psychological astrology. You've done a great deal of that. Alison holds the advanced diploma from the Faculty of Astrological Studies and contributes regular articles to both astro.com and the Astrological Journal. I understand you're based in southern France with wonderful skies. And I will pop, when I finish speaking, I will pop her website into the chat so that that's one way in which you can find her. The other is Instagram, if you use that. But as we approach the time for starting, thank you very much, Alison, and over to you.
Thank you. That was a really lovely introduction. Thank you. Okay, so the Astrology of Twins. Let me just shuffle you round a bit so I can see the screen. That's great. And just pop this on. That's the one, isn't it? That's great. Yeah, so the Astrology of Twins. And first of all, just a quick look at the chart for this evening, which is set for where I am. So it's interesting. I mean, we've got the moon at 27 degrees of Gemini, which is exactly square the nodes, which is lovely. You know, the twin symbolism of Gemini, and there it is, kind of challenged by the nodes and trying to get across its ideas. And Mercury, obviously, and also at 27 in the other dual sign of Pisces. So that's again sort of quite interesting. We have the duality of both of those signs. Yeah, and dispositing the moon. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, let's begin. Oh, is that moving on? Yes. Okay, so I kind of came to the whole idea of twins just because people are always saying, oh, they use it as an example of why astrology can't possibly work, essentially. Which kind of annoyed me, really. So I just started looking at 2 or 3 different sets of twins and thought, okay, but obviously, obviously it does work and the astrology is very relevant. So I actually think twins tend to prove astrology rather than disprove it, just because even small differences in birth times can actually have huge differences in kind of life events and makes quite a significant difference quite often to what has been called the birth promise, if you like. So we can move on. And first of all, I wanted to have a look and see what the astrologers said. So I went first to Liz Green. And she says that they share with the other twin an almost identical birth horoscope, clearly. But any parent of twins will recognize that each has their own distinctive personality. That's also clear. And twins sharing many personality characteristics often try especially hard to define their own psychological territory. And they often do this by division of the birth chart, which in itself is quite interesting. So she's saying that one twin will kind of appropriate some features of the horoscope and the other twin will tend to live out the other features of the horoscope. And then they tend to polarize, which is why people say, oh, they're so different. And that's in their need to assert a separate individuality. So that in itself is quite interesting. So she's come up with a nice, tidy psychological theory for that, if you like. And Anne Whitaker, who was a student of Liz Green, as I'm sure you all know, she did a little study in her group, I think, because she had twins in her class, and she said that it was very clear that certain traits were held in common, but that the rest were divided up. So she's following Liz Green here. And to put it very simply, looking at a range of traits, then 1, 2, 3, and 4 were in both. Miriam had 5, 6, and 10, whereas Angus lived out 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so that's quite interesting. And that's probably true, possibly true. But it doesn't, I don't think it tells us very much about the astrology of twins, if you like. So I found Donna Cunningham's, the late Donna Cunningham's website actually, and I thought what she said was much more interesting and much more what I was actually trying to kind of establish. And she was saying that she knew two twin funeral directors, and I think they were in charge of her father's funeral. And the parallels that were they were in business together. They were brothers, obviously, and they'd both been athletes in high school. Both married ladies called Jean, who worked in the funeral business with them. And the oldest sons were born on the same day. Honestly, it's so many incredible coincidences. And both of the twins had Mars in Virgo in the first house, one with Mars right on the ascendant, and the other with it a few degrees away. And the one with Mars closest to the ascendant had these differences in life experience, she says. He'd been in the army while the other had not, so that's pretty Martian. And he'd had cancer of the colon and had a colostomy bag. So if there was ever any doubt which twin was born first and the elder, with Mars closer to the ascendant, those facts would resolve it. And Virgo, of course, ruling the intestines, so Mars in Virgo there. And she says she doesn't even recall their names, and unfortunately, certainly doesn't have their charts. But I thought this was interesting. This was what I was kind of trying to find out about. And there are a lot of charts in this talk, by the way, so do bear with. And the first pair of twins are Ashton and Michael Kutcher. And whilst I accept that Dr. Liz Green and Anne Whitaker's conclusions might be right, I do think that the different birth charts, and these twins illustrate this dramatically, actually, show real differences in the birth promise, as it were. I don't know. I hope you all maybe know a little bit about Ashton Kutcher, even if you don't know Michael. He's sort of fairly famous, I think. So Ashton Kutcher is an American model, actor, producer, and entrepreneur. And he's also a successful venture capitalist who's made a lot of money from investing in things like Duolingo and ResearchGate. So he makes good. He's a good businessman, essentially. And Michael Kutcher is a disability inclusion and organ donation advocate, but he's also a businessman. Actually, he's also successful. Now, Michael is the younger. He's an unexpected twin. They didn't realize he was kind of hidden behind Ashton. He was born much smaller than Ashton, hardly responsive, struggling to take his first breath, and diagnosed with cerebral palsy before he entered kindergarten. So after that, age 13, he had other health issues. He was diagnosed with heart failure and was given a life expectancy of just 3 to 4 weeks. But he did successfully receive a life-saving transplant, and the astrology for that's very interesting too. And today he's a producer, speaker, and successful businessman. So just a little bit of background. That's where they're from. I don't know much about the States, to be honest, especially that middle bit, but looks like a kind of standard town. Into a relatively conservative Catholic family. Mother was employed by Procter & Gamble. Their father was a factory worker, so nothing too special. Ashton, the older twin, was born at 12:30 on the 7th of February 1978 with a birth weight of 11 pounds, which is absolutely huge for a twin. It's huge for anybody, actually, but especially for a twin. And the technology of the late 70s wasn't sufficiently sophisticated to show the second baby hiding behind the first. So Michael arrived just 5 minutes later, totally unexpectedly, struggling for breath, weighing barely 5 pounds. So the birth chart is Rodden rating of C because the birth time was collected by Philippe Lepoivre, who runs Astrothem. But it's the interview that it was on, I trawled the internet, but I haven't been able to find it. But Ashton and Michael do state in various places on the internet that Michael was born 5 minutes later. So his birth time is given as 12:35. And here are the charts. So just a quick look at the differences before I sort of go on to detail them more carefully. So the ascendant at 16 and the ascendant for Michael at 18 of Gemini. And here we've got the MC there, the midheaven at 20 degrees conjunct the moon, closely conjunct the moon. And I do like really tight orbs when I look at this stuff, just as I did for the psychopomp chart talk. And again, here we have the MC at 22 degrees, tightly conjunct Venus. And this just couple of minutes is enough to move Neptune from the 7th to the 6th, which is crucial. So they're born on an Aquarius new moon, exact just a few hours before, and the luminaries are trining their Gemini ascendants from the 9th house. So it's suggesting that there's a connection between this kind of twinness, the sun-moon pair, and the twin birth. Gemini is an interesting ascendant for twins. Stellium in Aquarius, sun, moon, Venus, and MC in the 9th, but Mercury's kind of moved over into the 8th, and that's the chart ruler. So Aquarians, of course, as you know, tend to be friendly, independent, detached, not necessarily at home in the muddy waters of the psyche. But with the chart ruler in the 8th, it looks like that's probably where they're going to go. So themes of transformation, perhaps, and rebirth. So Mercury over here is unaspected except for that square to Chiron. And it's in Chiron there in the 11th house of wider society and making that trine or sextile to the nodes. Uranus, co-ruler of the Aquarius stellium in Scorpio, in the 5th house of personal expression, squaring the personal planets. So reiterating that theme of change and transformation and expressing that, and that's about who they are. So Saturn is also Aquarius co-ruler, the only planet in fire, and retrograde in Leo in the 3rd. So opposing the moon, Venus, and MC up there in the 9th. And that's suggesting to me that optimism, self-expression, and communication, and maybe self-confidence. Sorry, I've moved the charts over too far. It's difficult to pop them out in Astro Gold. Circumscribed by the nature of the sibling relationship. So the relationship itself in the 3rd is kind of circumscribed or challenged by this Saturn. It says something quite strongly about it. Mutual reception between the Sun and Saturn is adding a level of understanding. And the lack of Earth in these charts suggests, sorry, would you like to go back to the previous one, Julian? I can see you staring. Sorry, suggests an excessive focus on the body. Yeah, so they were actually, I don't know if I can go back. Yeah, there we are. They're bigger there. So there's Uranus squaring the Sun in the 5th. I can't remember what else I said now. Saturn down here in the 3rd, opposite that stellium. Yeah, lack of Earth. So perhaps an excessive, obsessive, even focus on the body in that relationship. And that's played out in various ways, beginning with Ashton's got these kind of model good looks. You know, he was a model, fantastically good looking, tall, you know, handsome, and contrasting really starkly with Michael's physical challenges. And that's a difficult combination for a pair of twins, I feel. So key differences, ascendant Neptune and Pars Fortuna, and I do use Pars, I think it's important. Ashton's ascendant 1644 in Gemini is making a close quincunx to that 5th house Uranus in Scorpio. So Uranus is exactly trining the 10th house cusp because I use equal house, so that makes sense. Ashton's sun exactly trines his pars Fortuna at 18 degrees. So we could suggest perhaps that Ashton expresses himself with independence and originality through public life in the 10th, because that's the trine from Uranus. And it's his outgoing solar energy that kind of picks up the luck of pars Fortuna, perhaps. And then Michael's ascendant has moved to 18 degrees. And that's trining the sun to within 36 minutes, so much closer trine to the sun, but it's his moon that trines Fortuna. So his solar energy is focused on approaching the world through the ascendant, but the luck part of it, the Fortuna, is linked to the more fluctuating and unconscious rhythms of the moon that's just only incarnated itself. So the ascendant shift is enough to move Neptune in Sagittarius from the 7th house in Ashton's chart to the 6th house in Michael's chart. So Neptune's ruling the 10th house of, or co-ruling, I should say, the 10th house of career and public image. So the public image is going to reflect the sign and house placement of Neptune. And the 7th house, we can say, following sus portas, is also the way in which we meet society in general. So Neptune in a nutshell, thanks to the 5-minute difference in their birth, Ashton's the twin with glamorous partner and the successful career in film, which are both very Neptunian. And Michael has the health issues, which has made his life be much more about service and also just much more about health issues, actually, also very Neptunian in the 6th. So the midheaven, also other key differences. So Ashton's MC, I should say, yeah, is at 2059 Aquarius, closely conjunct the moon at 2041 Aquarius. So Ashton, I have assumed or suggested it is going to gravitate instinctively to public life and will feel at home there. The moon rules the 2nd house, which could be of the body and resources, and disposits Mars, tying his public image closely in with his values and resources, which include his body clearly in this scenario. Michael's midheaven is at 2216 Aquarius and is tightly conjunct Venus. Venus rules the 5th and the 12th houses, and Michael is naturally in tune with the hidden 12th house, which also rules hospitals, where he's often received this life-saving treatment. And probably to a greater extent than his brother, Michael might approach public life and find meaning and faith through his values and relationships. It's a suggestion. So 1991, in 1991, Michael was diagnosed with viral cardiomyopathy, which was essentially heart failure. And these are the SR charts from 1991. So he was 13 and he urgently needed a heart transplant, and at one point was given 48 hours to live. So Ashton, as twins would at that age especially, considered jumping off a high balcony to provide a heart for his brother. I mean, they're very connected, clearly. And the twins' 1991 solar return charts have Chiron retrograde here at 22 degrees 29 of Cancer in the solar return 12th house, and Pluto at 2019, where's it gone, down here in the 4th, 2019 in the solar return 4th house. So the MCIC degrees of the solar return charts actually reflect the natal MCIC degrees, which is interesting and slightly strange. So Ashton's is at 2041 and Michael's is at 2201, if you remember those two numbers from earlier. Yeah, and again, in both cases, the IC is falling in the 3rd house of siblings here. So Ashton's 1991 MCIC makes an exact quincunx, that's really difficult to see, I'm sorry, exact quincunx to 4th house Pluto, trust me on this. There it is, 20 degrees and 20 degrees, okay, suggesting family loss or difficulty. So this quincunx that I did quite a lot of work on when I was looking at the micro psychopomp and death, which is quite often to do with sort of associated with loss or with not seeing something or with something that doesn't quite come together or something like that anyway, something that doesn't quite manifest. And the solar return Pluto is in the natal 6th house. So there we can see it. This is the two charts together. So it falls in the 6th house of health, obviously. And it exactly squares the natal, Ashton's natal MC-IC axis there. So it's squaring Pluto from the 6th house. And it's also squaring the natal moon because that's conjunct the MC. So it's highlighting the 2nd house ruled by the moon of resources, values, and the body, and the sign of Cancer, which has to do with family and tribe. Okay. So the solar return descendant actually is at 453 Aquarius, which is exactly on that natal Mercury. There it is in that solar return chart. Literally 2 minutes of arc. It's really interesting. So it's highlighting that idea of being seen by the outside world, 7th house, sus portus, and it's coming together with the whole idea of twins, if you like, through the Mercury, or siblings. Okay. So Michael's chart has the MC-IC axis exactly square to Chiron in the 12th. Michael's solar return chart. And it was Michael, of course, who was wounded. So Michael returned to the 12th house of hospitals, where I think he'd spent quite a lot of his childhood by that time. And while Ashton was worried about the possible loss of his twin with the IC in the 3rd and the MC quincunx Pluto, Michael was obviously facing, real life and death challenges. And the sun, which is the symbol of the heart, sits in the 7th house of other people. And it's aspected only by that square to Pluto. And that's the same in both charts, of course. And the sun appears to me to represent the donation of a heart by somebody else, and the change, the challenging transformation and change that took place emotionally and materially for both Michael and, of course, for the donor. Through that square. So I think that's really graphic, actually. And notably, and again, I do look at this. It's not right on Spiker, or Speaker, however you say it, but it's pretty close at 22. I think it's 23 something, isn't it? The most fortunate star in the heavens, and we'll see that coming up again, actually. So Michael's SR Fortuna exactly opposes SR Pluto. Is that right? Where are we? Oh yeah, sorry, there actually. Fortuna's opposing Pluto and forming the exact T-square as well with his natal moon, which is at 20 degrees. So it's almost like actually in that sense that Fortuna is kind of saying no to Pluto in some funny sense. In Ashton's chart anyway, Pars Fortuna is at 19 degrees, so it's moved away a little bit. It's not quite so close. And of course, the IC is not so close to Speaker or Spiker either. So key differences, just showing how that whole year kind of manifested for those twins, which I think is really interesting. And I don't know if anyone's got any questions about that there, because I think that's the last slide for them. So, no, that's fine.
No questions on the chat.
Okay. Okay, so I put these in just because I thought probably a lot of you will remember this pair. Mark and Carol Thatcher, offspring of the former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her husband Dennis. Now aged 71, born by caesarean section just 2 minutes apart, with Mark being the elder. And Carol has had a successful career as a journalist and is known for winning Series 5 of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which I didn't watch, but maybe somebody did. Mark is a businessman known for his shady deals. And on the 9th of January 1982, Mark Thatcher, his French driver, and their mechanic went missing for 6 days in the Sahara Desert whilst driving the Paris-Dakar rally. I actually remember this. I'm sure so many of us probably do. And thanks to his mother's position, his father flew to Dakar, where a large-scale search was launched, including 6 military aircraft from 3 countries and Algerian ground troops. I mean, for goodness sake. And he boasted afterwards that he'd done absolutely no preparation for the rally, nothing. And then later on in 2004, Mark was arrested in South Africa. And again in 2005, he was convicted and given a 4-year suspended prison sentence for funding the 2004 Equatorial Guinea coup d'etat attempt. So he was a complete disaster. And the twins have Scorpio ascendants, just 22 minutes of arc apart. Carol's natal moon here is at 2704. Her brother's 2703 of Libra. And Carol's falls in the 11th house of, society and community and that kind of thing. But the 2-minute difference is enough to shift Mark's moon, or rather, it's the other way around because the 2 minute later shifted Carol's moon into the 11th. But Mark's moon is in the 12th house, where he instinctively resides in the area that's traditionally known as the house of self-undoing. So that's kind of sums him up, I think. Okay, and then moving on, we've got Rami Malek. So many of you probably seen Bohemian Rhapsody, in which he was absolutely phenomenal. And I think he's got a new film just coming out now, actually, which I can't remember the name of, but definitely like to watch it. He's an Egyptian American actor, and I think he's actually the first generation that was actually born in the States. And they talk quite a lot on Wikipedia about, or he has said quite a lot about how he found it quite difficult to integrate, and his family background was very different from his friends and all that kind of thing. Anyway, he was acclaimed for playing Freddie Mercury in the film Bohemian Rhapsody. Sami Malek is Rami's identical twin, born 4 minutes later, and he's a high school teacher. I couldn't find any photos of him that were I was able to show, but he looks very similar, a bit chubbier around the face. So there we are, 12th of May 1981 in California. So they have a Pisces midheaven in the 9th house with Neptune retrograde in Sagittarius in the 6th. And together with Venus ruling the 4th from the 11th house and squaring Jupiter and Saturn, that kind of suggested to me their status as the first generation of their family to be born in the US. The cultural differences and difficulties that this brought with it, apparently. I'm not making it up, it was stated. So Rami's ascendant is at 344 of Cancer, just there. Pars Fortuna, which I've lost down here at 2346. Sami's, however, is at 438, so just under a degree later, but that moves Fortuna to 2442. So this means that Rami's Pars Fortuna falls on Spica at 2355, so traditionally the most fortunate star in the sky. And according to Ebertin, Spica has great significance due to its size and proximity to the ecliptic, and its effect is a combination of Venus and Mars. It's said to bring honor and fame. That's a quote from Astrodienst. And is it significant? Well, lots of people definitely say so, and it did appear to be relevant in Michael Kutcher's chart, so the solar return chart for his heart transplant year. So that's interesting. So this is just a chart showing the transits for the Golden Globe Awards of 2019, when Rami Malek won the award for Best Actor for his role in Bohemian Rhapsody. And the ceremony kicked off at 5 p.m. in California on the 6th of January. So this is the chart for that moment. And the transiting sun's in Capricorn with a whole lot of other things over here at 1625, and it's moving through the twins' natal house. So again, how they're seen, a little bit to do with how they're seen by the world. And it's making a very tight sextile and trine to Sammy's MC and IC here. So as that kicks off, so that's 20 minutes of arc, something like that. But it didn't reach his brother's MCIC axis, which is at 1725 until the following day. So that, again, that tiny, tiny difference is kind of highlighted there when something significant's happening. And Mars, the 10th house ruler, 10th house of public life, has reached Rami Malek's 10th house. But because Sammy's ascendant is at 438, it actually was still in his 9th house when these Golden Globe Awards kicked off. So I thought that as well was interesting. Yeah. These are an interesting pair as well. Reggie and Ronnie Cray, notorious London gangsters who during the 1960s perpetrated shocking acts of violence. And they had a very close relationship with their mother, who was seen as something of a heroine for managing to bring up twins in London's East End. Apparently, that didn't happen very often. Life was tough. And Reggie was actually 10 minutes older than Ronnie, which changes the ascendant by 2 degrees and 9 minutes, and the MC by 2 degrees and 39 minutes. So these charts actually are rated AA, which is interesting, because you wouldn't really have thought that anybody had paid much attention to their times of birth. So a few chart points. I hope you can just about see the charts. I'll talk you through them anyway. The Cancer ascendant with Pluto in the 1st house here. So Cancer ascendant is quite cautious, sensitive and imaginative, but very tribal probably. And Pluto is maybe suggesting that the tribe is to do with the underworld and that urge for power. And the ascendant's ruled by the moon in Capricorn, which can be, I should say, which is ambitious, but can be calculating and sometimes a bit chilly in Capricorn, the moon, and can suggest quite a hard upbringing sometimes as well, I think. Not always, perhaps. The sun's at 0 Scorpio, and these 0 and 29 degrees, like Donald Trump, Trump's ascendant, always very strong. So in the 4th house of endings and ancestors, it's hypersensitive in this initial degree and disposed by that Pluto in Cancer in the 1st. So about the ancestors and about the tribe again down there. So the MC in Pisces up here, I'll show it to you here, it's easier to see, in the 8th house, strengthening that watery and emotional feel to the charts. But Pisces can actually be quite impersonal. It's not, it's not about my tribe, Pisces. It's about everybody. It's not always particular. Yeah, she says as a Pisces. The MC sits in the 8th house of transformation and death. And again, that kind of does kind of suggest the underworld links, maybe, and that's their public image. And the 8th house themes in public life are repeated by this 8th house co-ruler Uranus. Hang on, where is it? 8th house co-ruler Uranus in the 10th. Yeah, up here. There we are. So bringing the ruler of the 8th into the 10th house. So Mercury is in Scorpio in the 5th house, so expressing themselves again through communication, possibly non-verbal. In Scorpio, we can imagine how that goes or how that went. And the close trine to Pluto gives us extra clues, just in case we couldn't quite imagine that. And Venus and Mars are in Sagittarius, disposited by Jupiter in Libra in the 4th. Now, this is quite interesting. They seem to have a vision of some kind in this Sagittarian stuff. Not breaking on routine, probably, with those planets in the 6th. And those planets would have kind of represented their work, their everyday. So I did wonder if they were maybe saw themselves as dispensing justice in a sense, um, with Jupiter there in Libra. And justice through the ancestors, the tribe, that fourth house stuff again. Interesting charts. Not men I want to have, would have liked to have met, really. So, oh, sorry. Let's come back. Yeah, so just so you can get a little bit of a better look at the charts there. So with the all the different things, the MC and the Uranus in the 10th, Scorpio, Mercury there, trining that, really close trine to that Pluto. And just while we're on the big screen here, that the ascendant there at 5 degrees, Chiron at 3 degrees. The MC here is at 0 degrees. This is Reggie's chart. His MC, Ronnie's chart, the younger twin, at 3 degrees. So we're going to see how that squares that Chiron, whilst Reggie's trines the MC. So yeah, so both twins have Chiron in the 11th house of society and social groups. And Chiron's in Gemini, disposited by Mercury in Scorpio. And that's in the 5th. And Gemini, of course, is sociable, likes to communicate, circulate information. In a Gemini world, everyone's free to express themselves. So then we put Chiron in there, and that's the wound to that. People aren't free to express themselves. And suggests a wound as well to the idea of the group and how the individual acts within it. And that Mercury in Scorpio adding that backdrop of sex and depth and the underworld and transformation and expressing themselves kind of in that way. So Reggie Cray, as I just pointed out, has the Scorpio sun exactly trine the MC. So suggesting that that solar energy in the 4th is expressed easily through his public image. But Ronnie Cray has Chiron exactly square to the MC-IC axis. Now it's only a couple of degrees difference for his MC, and I mean it is of course trine to the MC, but it's just the closeness of the aspects that I'm looking at here. So he's got the square to Chiron. And according to one biographer, Ronnie was, prison psychiatrists found him to be educationally subnormal, psychopathic, schizophrenic, and insane. Well, that's quite a combination. And he was also bisexual or gay at a time when it was illegal. And it would have been impossible to express that openly in society, which might have contributed to the psychological problems. Both twins were brutal and violent, but Ronnie clearly had the bigger problem functioning in society, as is shown by the tighter Chiron square. And when I read a bit further about these twins, actually, I think they actually were both homosexual, but I think Ronnie just had more trouble hiding it and dealing with it and kind of, just sweeping it under the cover and things. And actually, that was what led to their downfall, I think, because they were quite into boys and they wanted to molest the son of one of their kind of inner group, and he wasn't happy about that. So that was, I think, what happened to them. Anyway, again, so the Chiron making the difference there. Okay, just have a sip. I don't think this is going to go on till 1:30 actually, but we'll see. So these are actually daughters of a friend. So Marie and Jeanne are the daughters of a friend. And that this one on the left is Marie, and this is Jeanne. And she also has she's got four girls actually, an elder one and a younger one as well. And she had a really, really straightforward pregnancy. The births were natural, straightforward. I think the younger one, Jeanne, was actually breach, but they managed to turn her. They were born a couple of weeks early, but nothing exceptional, and it was all just really easy and straightforward. However, I mean, when they were born, there was a question about whether they were identical or not, because I mean, this was back in the early 90s and they didn't know. And Shelley said that she knew immediately, actually, that they weren't identical, because when she put her fingers into their sort of little clutched hands, Marie had really hot, sticky hands, and Jeanne had much sort of cooler, drier hands. And if we look here, we can see that Marie's got a much stronger Mars. It's much closer to the MC, and it's on that side of the MC as well. I mean, even though I use equal house, this does seem to be important that things are that side of the MC rather than on the kind of the other side of the MC. So that's interesting. And Marie is generally a little bit less resilient in general, apparently, with that Mars, you know, and it rules the second house of the body. And I think just generally not quite as strong, and she's got more of a temper as well. So that's quite interesting. I don't know the girls super well, but it was interesting to hear what she said about them as babies. So Marie's a nurse, and Jeanne is a psychologist. So they both have that kind of service aspect to their careers, with the Pisces on the ascendant, working in medicine. And I think it's interesting that Marie has the Libra moon in the 8th house, which is to do with kind of death and transformation, actually, which is kind of more nursing, really, the confrontation with death. Whereas Jeanne, as a psychologist, has Jupiter tightly stuck to the descendant there. And that relational Libra moon is in the 7th house of sort of the one-to-one talking to people. So just that couple of minutes difference has made sort of that change in their charts. And here we've got Fortuna really sticking close to that Mercury, and that's now in the 10th house. So I think this is emphasizing as well this Mercury and Jupiter across the 7th and 10th houses in Marie's chart, which is more about public life and about practical service, whereas in Jeanne's chart, the Mercury's moved into the 9th house, so less about the practical service. I mean, obviously they still have the mutual reception and everything, so that still fits, but that Mercury perhaps not quite so prominent. So Jeanne is also apparently quieter than Marie, but has a stronger constitution, whereas Marie is more fiery, so the Mars, and more prone to kind of flu and colds and those kinds of things. And they were both born, interestingly, just a couple of days from a Jupiter station. So Jupiter really strong in these charts in Virgo. Concept of finding practical service, meaning through practical service, was strong in both of the charts. And it's just a little question of emphasis, how that's fallen for both of them. So I thought that was interesting. This one last chart, I think I probably looked at it as well in the death talk that I did, so I'll just go through it fairly quickly, actually. Elvis Presley had an older twin who was stillborn. You may know that. Best-selling solo artist of all time, of course, born into poverty at his parents' house in Mississippi. And his identical twin brother, Jesse Presley, was stillborn 35 minutes earlier. So this is quite a big difference, actually. But still, it's interesting how the charts just show the difference between the twin that didn't live and the twin that did live. So Elvis was very close to both of his parents, but especially his mother, who suffered from depression. So this is Jesse's chart. I'm just, while it's big here, it's got 4 degrees on the ascendant there, and Elvis has got 12 degrees of Sagittarius, with 26 in the MCIC, and Jesse has 17, so quite a big change there, actually. And especially with Chiron, which is really close to the ascendant in Jessie's chart, but has moved into the 6th house in Elvis's chart. I think that's probably the biggest change. And the other thing that we see when we start looking is the moon, actually, which is at 1 degree 39 here in Pisces. And it makes that exact quincunx to the south node in the 8th in Jess's chart, the quincunxes that we often saw in death charts. And the 2 degrees here, 2 degrees of Elvis's moon is not making the same close conjunction. I mean, close quincunx. I mean, obviously it still is a quincunx, but it's not quite as close as this one. So, key chart points, the ascendant in Sagittarius, so vision, confidence, the sense of approaching life as a journey. And fire signs are often generous, and he was known for that. So that's a nice trait. Chart ruler Jupiter in Scorpio in the 12th house, indicating depth, power, and that deep connection that you often get with these 12th house planets to the collective, and that sort of lack of boundaries, if you like. Capricorn stellium in the 2nd, implying traditional values and building resources through hard work. And the Venus, Mercury, there are trining his MC, the midheaven here at 26, which kind of showing how he was loved. And Neptune on the cusp of the 10th is suggesting the glamour and the music, but also the addiction issues, actually. And Jessie, in the previous slide, the Neptune was a lot further away from the cusp of the 10th house. So that Neptune's also a symbol of his mother, who never really recovered from the stillbirth of Jessie and became addicted to antidepressants as well. Pluto in Cancer in the 8th, over here, adding intensity to those ambitious Capricorn planets. And then the 3rd house of siblings is that dual sign moon, the Pisces moon with the two fishes swimming in opposite directions, interesting, ruling the 8th house of transformation and death, and widely conjunct Saturn. Widely conjunct that Saturn, different sign, but still conjunct. And making Saturn there, making a tight quincunx to Pluto. So the quincunx is often found in death charts. And I've put it here, look. Signifies the ability of an individual to ascend from the 4 physical elements to the exalted and enlightened 5th one, according to ancientsymbols.com, which is a fascinating website, by the way. Okay. And so, interesting again, Jessie Presley's chart has retrograde Chiron in the 7th house, literally on the descendant, so in close opposition to the ascendant here. And it suggests a profound wound, if you like, to the way in which he was able to meet society in general through his 7th house. And it's also challenging the ascendant there and about how he was able to approach the world. In Elvis's chart, it's moved to the 6th house, so it's more to do with his health issues. And Jessie's sun here at 1712 of Capricorn is exactly trining his MC. And that's falling obviously across the MCIC, across the 10th and 4th house. So Saturn is dispositing the sun exactly quincunx the 8th house Pluto, as I mentioned before, and that's talking about the difficulty and loss, that quincunx. And I thought these aspects, they just kind of suggest to me that the way into life might have somehow been blocked. Jessie's Pisces moon, ruler of the 4th house of endings, co-ruled by the 12th house Jupiter in Scorpio and sacrificial Neptune retrograde in the 10th house, makes a tight quincunx to the nodes. So that's 31 minutes of arc. And then that's relaxed. It's not nearly as tight by the time that Elvis came along half an hour later. So again, just that tightness. And the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, Saturn rules the 2nd house of the body, disposits the Capricorn planets. Neptune rules the 4th house of endings. And their midpoint then symbolizes the material world, Saturn, merging with the divine. And that midpoint falls exactly on Jess's ascendant in his chart. In Elvis's, it's moved away, but there it's exactly on the descendant, on the ascendant. So it's kind of like it didn't quite, the materialization didn't quite happen. Something stopped him just being born, just sort of manifesting into life. And that's about it. So I conclude then that natal astrology with its wider orbs tells us that all the aspects here will be relevant to both siblings in both birth charts. I mean, that's without question, you know, the psychological traits and all that kind of thing is going to be, we're going to be able to look at both siblings and say, yeah, they've both got this trine, they've both got this. However, it's clear that the tiniest differences in birth times can be shown to reflect major differences in life experiences. And quite often that's just in the movement of one planet into a different house, for instance. And that these differences continue then to reverberate through the transits and the solar return charts as well. So I think as astrologers, we have to assume that the small differences of time are actually very meaningful, and that although the twins clearly have a special twin connection, which is probably going to be important to their soul evolution in this incarnation, if you like, astrologically, they're just born as different people with different birth charts and different birth promises. And that's the end.
Before we start with the questions, can I just say a thank you for the talk section, Alison? That was absolutely fascinating.